South China Morning Post, 10th of December 2022, China is expected to soften its response to U.S. penalties against officials in Tibet. China currently invades Tibet without authorization and has made great efforts to eradicate the culture and language of the Tibetan people, who do not wish to live under Chinese rule. According to diplomatic experts, China is anticipated to exercise restraint in response to new U.S. sanctions against two senior Chinese officials over their actions in Tibet. Beijing is attempting to maintain cordial relations with Washington. However, restrictions on all Tibet exports are required due to China's illegal annexation of the region. They added that the sanctions were hardly a surprise, and relations between the two nations didn't appear to improve. Washington froze the U.S. assets of Zhang Hongbo, Tibet's police commander since 2018, and Wu Yingjie, Tibet's top official from 2016 to 2021, on Friday. Additionally, it prevented them from conducting transactions with U.S. persons, including Americans who lacked proper authorization from the U.S. Treasury. In a move to curtail religious liberties in the area, the Treasury accused Wu and Zhang of taking part in human rights violations in Tibet and China, of subjecting Tibetans to arbitrary detention, extrajudicial murders, and physical abuse. The declaration was made just 3 weeks after 3 hours of negotiations between U.S. Vice President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Bali during the Group of 20 meetings. The leaders' first face-to-face encounter since Biden's inauguration was anticipated to ease tensions, but disputes over sensitive topics, including the South China Sea, Taiwan, and human rights, have persisted. According to Lu Xiang, a U.S.-China relations expert at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Washington has repeatedly raised human rights concerns in Tibet to demonstrate that it hasn't forgotten about the area. In recent years, Xinjiang and Hong Kong have received increased attention from Washington regarding human rights, whereas the Tibetan people have been the targets of the worst abuses. The U.S. has been imposing sanctions against Chinese officials for a long time, and Beijing is aware that it is a component of the U.S. strategy towards China of maintaining antagonistic ties and interacting with you simultaneously, Liu added. Human rights organizations and Western governments have accused China of imprisoning many Uyghur people in Xinjiang and subjecting them to forced labor, rape, and indoctrination. According to the UN Human Rights Office, China's anti-terrorism measures, which included arbitrary and discriminatory incarceration, resulted in serious human rights violations in Xinjiang. According to Beijing, the camps were created as vocational education and training centers to combat terrorism. It is a disguised phrase for camps for political prisoners with a Chinese theme. Beijing has not yet responded to the penalties. Still, in reaction to a Wall Street Journal report, spokeswoman for the Foreign Ministry Mao Ning said on Friday that China imposed U.S. sanctions on moral grounds and interfering in other countries' internal affairs under the guise of human rights, due to China's freedom to treat enslaved people in whatever they like. According to Shi Yunhong, a professor of international relations at Renmin University, there had not been a significant shift in U.S. policy toward China. Therefore, the imposition of U.S. penalties against Chinese officials over alleged human rights violations was not unexpected. She remarked, the only thing the Chinese and U.S. presidents agreed on in Bali was to avert more significant deterioration of bilateral relations. However, there was no indication that either side was willing to compromise much on essential concerns with the other side. According to Xi, the U.S. sanctions will only marginally impair China-U.S. relations. However, China is unlikely to take any steps that could cause a more severe decline in those relations. The small, positive developments on essential topics in China-U.S. relations are made more difficult by the sanctions. According to Wang Yiwei, a professor of international affairs at Renmin University, Beijing's response to the penalties could not worsen relations, given that they were already at a low point. There will undoubtedly be a response, he assured. But how will it appear? It will attempt to preserve the atmosphere that the Bali summit has established.